Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on The Flash Season 3. So obviously in the most recent episode of this season of The Flash, we got the long-awaited, maybe a bit too long-awaited reveal of who the god of speed, Savatar, really was. And the person revealed to be under that suit of armor was none other than Barry Allen himself. Now, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of the reveal or who was actually under the metal mask of Savatar, it does allow us to speculate and go off evidence to guess which version of Barry Allen actually became Savatar. In the remainder of this video, I will be going over 5 possible options as to which version of Barry became Savatar. You know, these have been brought up online since the reveal and possibly even before the reveal. But be sure to leave your opinions on my options in the comments, as well as any other options I may have not put in this video. I'm very interested to see what everyone is thinking up. And of course, if you do go on to enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The first option we are going to go over is that Savatar is pre-flashpoint Barry. So the Barry that we could have seen or would have seen in Season 3 if he didn't run back at the end of Season 2 and, you know, create Flashpoint. Now you will notice that every option I talk about here is basically a future version of Barry, so a version of Barry that is older than the one we are with at the present time, who is the Flash. So how could pre-Flashpoint Barry be Savatar? Well, there are 2 ways. The first would be that he was traveling through time at the exact same time that Flashpoint started, which would, you know, keep him in existence as he would be out of that time at that moment, if you want to call it that. Or he could have been on another Earth. As we have seen earlier this season, the other Earths weren't affected by Flashpoint, so if this Barry was on another Earth at that time, he may have been kept safe from the timeline change. But upon the creation of Flashpoint, this Barry then becomes a time aberration similar to Reverse Flash in Legends of Tomorrow this season, and is then pursued by the Speed Force, possibly in the form of Black Flash or maybe just a Time Wraith. This would not only explain how he ended up trapped in the Speed Force, which would still be present day Barry's fault, as you know, he caused this Barry to become an aberration, but his conflict with either the Black Flash or even just a Time Wraith could have damaged his face like we have seen, you know, in that reveal. Now, before anyone brings up Iris being killed, I will bring that up later on in the video in its own section because there's no point mentioning it in every single option. I'll just bring it up towards the end. Now the second option, which is one that I've seen a lot of people bring up, I really don't like it and I'll explain why, and that's that Savatar is the 2056 version of Barry Allen that we saw on that message that was left to Rip Hunter that was introduced on Legends of Tomorrow but then brought up in the crossover this year. So as I did say, it was introduced on Legends of Tomorrow this season and was like a little story arc, I guess you could say, with Martin Stein and Jax for a couple of episodes leading up to the crossover. And I think that really explains what it was. It was just relevant to Legends at the time and just leading up to the Invasion crossover, and was sort of like a reason as to why the Dominators were doing what they were doing. It's because Barry was messing with time, but also because some other people did some other stuff. So it would be weird if something so relevant to Savatar was focused on Legends and then quickly brought up in the crossover. Like, it really wasn't too much of a main focus of the crossover. It was just mentioned a couple of times, then, you know, sort of panicked about for a bit, but it wasn't a main focus. So it would be weird if that was who Savatar ended up being. I just don't think that's the case. But as I said, if you do have a reason as to why this could actually be the case, just leave it in the comments. The next option is that Savatar is Barry shortly after 2024, so it could have been like 1 day, 1 month, or a few years from what we saw in episode 19. Now this option would have fit in pretty damn well, if not perfectly, but that's if we hadn't seen present day Barry, you know, like reunite Team Flash in 2024 and then set this future Barry down a better road. If present day Barry hadn't interacted with the future 2024 Barry and, you know, changed his view on everything, then 2024 Barry could have easily gone down the wrong path and actually become Savatar. But seeing that present day Barry did intervene, it almost makes it impossible that at any time in the near future after 2024 that Barry could possibly become Savatar. It just really wouldn't make too much sense. Like, he did look like he'd been changed for the best part. And with this option, I'm saying like pretty close to 2024. I'm not saying like 2036 he couldn't become Savatar, but I'm saying like the next few years after that, he definitely wouldn't become Savatar. So long-haired Barry wouldn't become Savatar. That's what I'm saying. Now, the second last option we have is a popular one that was going around even before Savatar was even revealed, and that is that Savatar is a time remnant of Barry, specifically the one we saw die in the finale of Season 2. There are no real extreme flaws with this option, as a time remnant has to be a future version of the person it is a remnant of. We saw him combust and, possibly go into the Speed Force, which he would in turn be trapped within. And then the process in which he died could have permanently left him with that scarring on his face, even if he came back to his full physical form. It just could be something that he's left with. I guess one flaw, I did say there was no real extreme flaws, but I guess one flaw would be his motivations to want to get back at Barry and kill Iris, because if you go back to that Season 2 finale, present day Barry says this, not the Time Remnant, but present day Barry says that the Time Remnant agreed to sacrifice himself, and the Time Remnant does run around the thing that Zoom made, so it's not like he was being forced to run around that. He was doing that on his own accord, so it would be weird if he tried to blame Barry for that, but you never know, they could go down that road. But this option was very popular. I just don't know if it would make an extreme amount of sense in regards to it being a good version of Barry to be Savatar. There are other options, the next one probably, which I do think fits Savatar a bit better. And that option I'm speaking of is also the last option, and that is that Savatar is the original Barry, the OG Barry that was meant to become the Flash in 2020. So this is like the Barry where he was the Flash, but his parents were still alive in the same timeline. So if you didn't actually know, the Flash TV show has been in an alternate timeline since Season 1. The whole show is set in an alternate timeline. The original timeline had the real Harrison Wells and his wife create the particle accelerator in 2020, which, like we saw in Season 1, gave Barry his powers. However, as we also saw, the Reverse Flash goes back to kill Barry as a child, ends up killing Nora Allen instead, then gets stuck in that time and has to pretend to be Harrison Wells in order to build the particle accelerator, make Barry the Flash, and use him to get back to the future, which we see all occur in 2013. So Barry gets his powers a full 7 years earlier than he was meant to in that original timeline, so that's a big change. However, when we went to the Flashpoint timeline at the beginning of this season, things were pretty similar to what they were in that original timeline, or what they should have been in that original timeline, such as Barry's parents being alive or not in jail in the case of his dad. So what if when Barry created the timeline we saw at the beginning of this season and then traveled to the present day of that said timeline, he replaced a version of Barry Allen that was on his way to becoming the Flash later on, like in 2020, like the original timeline. Not necessarily, that year, but, around that time. And yes, I know Kid Flash existed in this timeline, but we don't know what was necessarily meant to happen in the coming years. And you could also argue that Kid Flash existed in Flashpoint to just make up for the fact that there was no Barry Allen Flash, or you could say that there was a Flash, but he wasn't using his powers like he was meant to. Barry really wasn't using his powers. He had them in Flashpoint, as we saw, he just wasn't using them. So maybe, the universal time itself needed there to be a Flash that was going to use his abilities. That's a bit confusing, but that's a possible reason as to why Kid Flash existed. So if Barry replaced this already existing version of Barry in the future, that replaced Barry would need somewhere to go, such as the Speed Force, a prison within the Speed Force. And this would explain why Savatar says that the Flash trapped him in there because, well, he would have. We have had quotes such as, "Only one of us could live," as only one of them obviously could exist. Both of them couldn't exist at the same time in the same timeline. Savatar also said this, "You took everything from me, I am only this way because of you," which makes sense. Savatar has also mentioned throughout the season multiple times about how this Barry we are with on the show at the moment is greedy and selfish, which makes sense with this theory and option because we have seen Barry did the Flashpoint thing out of selfishness and greed. I know he wanted his parents back alive, but he didn't contemplate what everyone else's lives would be like once he had done this, how they would be affected. And we've seen the ramifications of that throughout the season. Now, this option is the only one, in my opinion, that makes sense in regards to why he would want to kill Iris West. And that is because the Barry that became Savatar, in this theory with, the original timeline stuff, he wouldn't have been attached to Iris. He wouldn't have been in love with her. he would feel no pain in killing her, but he would know that our Barry would. If you didn't know, in the comics, like, Barry gets attached to Iris once he becomes the Flash, and then he reveals himself to her. So if this Barry's like on his way to becoming the Flash, he most likely wouldn't have interacted with Iris, become attached to her and fall in love with her. As I said, there's no real connection to her. I just do find it hard to see any reason why a future version of Barry from the current timeline, so, you know, we're in 2017 at the moment, like a 2040 version would want to kill Iris. There are a lot of hoops to jump through for that to make sense of that, and seeing that there's not much time left in the season, I don't think they want to spend too much time on that, so I think this option in theory makes the most sense. But thanks for watching, guys. If you did enjoy the video, be sure to leave a like on it. As I said, let me know what you think of all these options. Did I leave an option out that you think is true? Do you think, like, I don't know, some other version of Barry is Savatar? What do you think's going on? Just leave all of those opinions in the comment section down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys, and goodbye.